I don't want anything from you. Those were the first words my son spoke to me that Christmas morning, and they broke me in a way I didn't know was possible. The fire crackled softly in the living room, snow dusted the windowsills like powdered sugar. Cinnamon and nutmeg lingered in the air from the muffins I'd baked just hours earlier, trying to make it feel like old times. I'd even pulled out the worn Santa tablecloth we used to laugh at when he was little, hoping the smell, the warmth, the familiarity might melt the ice between us. But Adam wasn't the same boy who used to race down the stairs in footy pajamas. Eyes sparkling with wonder, that boy was gone. In his place sat a teenager with arms folded tight, jaw clenched, and a silence louder than any scream. I had spent weeks planning this day not because I cared much for Christmas anymore, but because I was desperate for something to feel normal again, something to feel right. Since the divorce, our holidays had been fractured, split between timelines, calendars, court orders. But this year I had him, a full 48 hours, Christmas Eve to the evening of the 25th, I thought. Maybe I could fix things. Maybe we could start over. So I tried. God, I tried. I saved 4 months to buy him the one thing I thought he'd love, a silver watch he'd once pointed to in a shop window downtown. I remembered the exact words he said. That's a forever kind of watch. He didn't know. I heard him, but I did. I remembered. So I bought it, had it engraved with the words, "Forever, Dad." I wrapped it carefully, placed it beneath the tree, and waited. Now that same box sat and opened between us. I pushed it gently toward him. On the coffee table, trying to keep my voice calm. "This is for you," I said with a smile that felt too forced. "Go on, open it." He didn't move. "Adam?" I asked, softer this time. Still nothing. Just that same blank stare. Cold, distant, like I was a stranger in my own home. Finally, he spoke without looking at me. "I don't want anything." "From you?" Just like that, I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. Maybe he was joking. Maybe he was still waking up. "What?" "Come on, it's Christmas. Just open it." He looked up then. And what I saw in his eyes knocked the breath from my chest. Not anger, not sadness, just emptiness. Like someone had drained every ounce of love from him and replaced it with quiet resentment. "I said," he repeated, louder this time, "I don't want anything from you." I chuckled nervously, trying to salvage the moment. All right, tough guy now, huh? Just open it, you'll like it." He stood up, and just like that walked out of the room. No tantrum, no slamming, just a quiet, deliberate exit, like he couldn't bear to share the same air with me for another second. I sat there, frozen, staring at the unopened box like it had just burst into flames. My hand still outstretched, palm open, as if maybe he'd come back, as if maybe this was a joke, and any second now he'd run back in, laughing, saying, "Gotcha," like he used to when he was 7. But the hallway remained empty. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall, a cruel reminder that time, once lost, doesn't return. I leaned back slowly, pressing my hands to my face. I didn't know whether to scream or cry, maybe both, because in that moment it hit me. This wasn't just teenage moodiness or temporary rebellion. This was deeper, sharper. Something inside him had shifted, something I didn't see coming. Or maybe I just didn't want to. I began questioning everything. Had I done enough? Did I fight hard enough during the custody battle? Did I call him enough? Text him enough? Did I make the right choices when I moved closer to his school just to catch a glimpse of him after class? Did any of it even matter to him? Or had the silence in our home slowly become normal to him? He was only 16, but the way he carried himself, the way he looked at me, it was like he'd made up his mind about me a long time ago, and whatever image he held wasn't who I was. I stood up and walked to the hallway, stopping outside his door. I didn't knock. I just stood there, listening, hoping, but all I heard was music leaking through his earbuds, loud enough to block out the world, loud enough to block out me. I went back to the living room and sat beside the tree. The watchbox still rested on the coffee table, its ribbon slightly crooked. I picked it up and held it for a while. The weight of it suddenly felt heavier than it should. I turned it over in my hands and imagined his reaction, the one I'd pictured 100 times. His face lighting up, maybe a hug, a simple, "Thanks, Dad." But none of that happened. All I had now was the echo of his voice. "I don't want anything from you." Maybe that hurt more than if he'd yelled, more than if he'd cursed me out, because indifference feels like death, and as I sat there, watching the snow continue to fall outside the window, I realized this wasn't the start of a joyful Christmas. It was the beginning of something else, something I wasn't ready for, something I didn't understand, not yet, but I would, soon, because that unopened box would become more than just a gift. It would become the key to a truth neither of us was ready to face. There comes a moment in every parent's life when they realize their child is no longer looking at them, but through them, as if you're just another object in the room. I first felt that hollow gaze weeks before Christmas, but I kept brushing it off. Teenage phase, I told myself. He'll come around. But denial is a warm coat in a snowstorm. It keeps you numb until the cold finally reaches your bones. Adam used to greet me with a half smile, even on his worst days. He used to call me dad in that casual, unconscious way boys do. Like the word belonged to me, but lately I couldn't remember the last time he'd said it. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, he barely spoke to me. When he did, it was clipped, cold, like he was reciting lines from a script someone else had handed him. His eyes. God, his eyes looked like someone else's. I tried blaming the usual suspects. Maybe it was school, maybe his grades were slipping. Or some girl had broken his heart. Or maybe, and this one I kept buried deep, maybe it was his mom. Amanda and I had divorced 2 years ago. It wasn't bitter in the courtroom, but it was brutal in every other way. She moved on quickly, marrying someone she'd apparently known for years, though somehow that man had never come up in our marriage. His name was Grant, and he had the kind of smooth charm that made people trust him instantly, including, I feared, my son. When Adam started spending more time at their house, I didn't object. I thought, let him have stability. I told myself it wasn't about winning custody or keeping score. It was about Adam's happiness, but happiness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent and poisonous. One night, about 2 weeks before Christmas, I was trying to help Adam update his tablet. The Wi-Fi had glitched, and he handed it to me with a sigh and an eye roll. "You'll probably make it worse," he muttered. I laughed it off, trying not to take it personally. But while I was working on it, a message notification popped up from Amanda's number. I wasn't trying to snoop. Honestly, I wish I hadn't seen it. But once your eyes land on something, you can't unsee it. The message read, "You don't owe him anything, Adam. He walked out on us, not the other way around." My stomach turned. I froze, just staring at the words. My hand started to shake. I knew I should have locked the screen and handed it back, but I didn't. I opened the thread. 100 little betrayals spilled across the screen. "Don't let him guilt you. He made his choice. You're better off without his drama. He left because he couldn't handle being a real father." My throat went dry. I wanted to scream, throw the tablet, call Amanda and demand to know how long she'd been poisoning my son's mind. But all I did was sit there, staring at those digital daggers, wondering when I became the villain in the story of my own life. And the worst part, it wasn't true. I never walked out. I was pushed. After the divorce, I begged the court to let me stay close. I offered to pay more than what was ordered. I rearranged my entire life, downsized my apartment, changed jobs, took weekend shifts just to make time for Adam. But Amanda made it hard. She said he needed stability, and I was too unstable with my work schedule. She twisted everything. Every late pickup became neglect. Every missed call became abandonment. Eventually, Adam stopped calling me altogether. And I thought he just needed space. But space had turned into silence, silence into distance. And now, into disdain. After that night, I tried to talk to him. Really talk. "Hey," I said casually one afternoon, while driving him home from school. "You okay? You've seemed off lately." "I'm fine," he replied without looking up from his phone. I hope you know you can talk to me about anything." He didn't respond, just stared out the window, earbuds in, volume up. I wanted to reach into that silence and pull him back. But he was already gone. In the evenings, I'd try again. "How was school?" "Fine. You hungry?" "I made spaghetti. I already ate. Want to watch that movie we liked?" "No." I found myself talking to walls, cooking meals. He didn't touch, sitting alone in a living room full of memories, haunted by a boy who still lived there, but didn't live with me. I began replaying everything. Was it when I missed his middle school recital because I had food poisoning? Was it when I forgot his friend's name in front of the PTA dads? Was it because I couldn't afford to take him to Disneyland like Grant did? I kept trying to trace the crack back to its origin, but no matter how far back I went, I couldn't find the exact moment I lost him. Maybe because I didn't lose him all at once. Maybe I lost him in pieces, slowly, quietly. Until one day he looked at me like I was a stranger and I realized I didn't recognize him either. The worst part was knowing that someone else had filled my role, not just as a stepfather, but as a narrator. Someone had rewritten the story of our family and handed him a version where I was the enemy, and he believed it. Why wouldn't he? He was just a kid, trying to make sense of a broken home. Of course he clung to the louder voice, the one present. At every dinner, every football game, every bedtime, and me, I had become the background noise. That's when I realized something painful. This Christmas wasn't about healing. It was about surviving, if I had any chance of getting my son back. I had to break through the lies, but I didn't know how, not yet. All I knew was this: the boy in my house wasn't my son, not anymore. He was someone else's story now, and I was just a footnote. They say silence is golden. But that night, the silence felt like a curse, thick, suffocating, and full of unsaid things that clawed at the air like ghosts. The house was too quiet, too still. It was Christmas evening, but it felt like a funeral. I had spent the whole day trying to pretend the morning hadn't happened, that my son hadn't rejected the gift I poured my heart into, hadn't turned away from me like I was nothing. I still set the table. I still made his favorite dinner: roasted chicken, creamy mashed potatoes with extra butter, garlic green beans, and a store-bought pie because he always said my homemade crust tasted like soggy paper. I even lit the candles, the good ones, the ones I'd been saving for a special occasion. What could be more special than trying to save your only remaining bond with your child? As the clock ticked toward 7, I sat in the dining room alone, staring at the flickering flames, replaying 100 versions of how tonight could go. In one, he'd come down, apologize for the morning, and we'd really talk. In another, he'd ignore me completely, and I'd eat alone like I had the past 2 Christmases. But what actually happened was worse than anything I'd imagined. I heard the soft creak of the stairs. Adam appeared at the doorway. He was wearing his hoodie, pulled halfway over his head, and earbuds dangling around his neck. He looked at the food, the candles, the wine I wasn't even going to drink. His eyes scanned the room like it was all too much, too staged, too desperate, too late. I stood slowly, offering him a small smile. I kept it warm, I said, trying to sound casual. Your favorites. He didn't sit, didn't even step inside. He just stood there, one foot still in the hallway. And then he said it. I'm only here because Mom made me. The words hit like a punch to the chest. I blinked, trying to process them. What? What do you mean? She said it'd be rude not to come down, that I should at least say Merry Christmas or whatever. He shrugged, arms folded tight across his chest. So, Merry Christmas. Can I go now? No, my voice cracked too quickly. No, Adam, please, sit down, just for a minute. He didn't move. I stepped closer, placing a trembling hand on the back of the chair across from mine. Look, I know things have been hard. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm still your dad. That hasn't changed. He scoffed, loudly. Really? You're still my dad? His eyes finally locked onto mine, and there it was again, that hollow, angry glare that didn't belong to my little boy. I love you, I said, voice softer now. I always have. That's when he snapped. You love me? Then where the hell were you when I needed you? The room fell into stunned silence. The candles flickered like they, too, were shaken. I felt something twist in my gut, not because of what he said, but because he truly believed it. I was there, Adam, I whispered. I tried. No, you didn't. He shouted, stepping fully into the room, now fists clenched at his sides. You left. You didn't fight hard enough. You let Mom and Grant be the family while you sent awkward texts twice a month and showed up with sad gifts like that stupid watch. His words were fire, burning everything I had been holding together with shaky hands. But I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself the way I wanted to. I just looked at him. Really looked. This wasn't just anger. This was pain. Wounded, buried pain that no one had ever helped him unpack. Adam, I said carefully, your mom told you a version of things that isn't the whole truth. Oh, here we go, he snapped, rolling his eyes. Now you're gonna blame Mom. Classic. I'm not blaming her, I said, fighting to stay calm. I'm just asking you to listen. Please, I never stopped loving you. Not once. I fought to stay in your life. I called. I wrote. I begged the court. I moved closer so I could be near you, and yet I only saw you on holidays, he shot back. You were just some guy I visited. You weren't my dad. That last part nearly buckled my knees. I stepped back slowly, swallowing hard, trying to stay upright beneath the weight of his words. I didn't know how to fix this, didn't even know where to begin. He turned away, already heading for the front door. Adam, wait, my voice cracked. Please don't walk away, not like this. He stopped at the door, hand resting on the knob. I took a few slow steps toward him. I know I messed up. I know it's going to take more than a dinner or a gift to fix this. But I'm here, right now, and I want to be your dad again. He didn't turn around. For a moment, the world stood still. I thought maybe he was about to turn. Maybe he'd say something. Maybe we'd start again. Then he turned halfway, just enough for me to see his face. You are no longer family. And with that, he slammed the door so hard the windows shook. I stood there, frozen, staring at the door like it had swallowed him whole. Outside, the wind howled. The snow had started again, heavier now, covering everything in white. Inside, the candles flickered weakly, their light unable to chase away the darkness settling in my chest. He was gone, not just from the room, but from me, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if he'd ever come back. I didn't leave the house for days after he slammed that door, not even to take out the trash. The world outside continued to turn, people laughing, cars rushing past, Christmas lights still blinking, but inside my walls, time stood still. A kind of emotional winter had settled into my bones. There was no hunger, no energy, just silence. And grief. The kind of grief you feel when someone is still alive but gone in every way that matters. I sat on the couch for hours sometimes, with the TV on but muted, staring through the screen. Sometimes I'd find myself gripping the watch box like it was a lifeline, flipping it open and closed, reading the engraving over and over forever, Dad. I kept hoping, irrationally, that if I read it enough times, he'd suddenly show up and say he was sorry, that it was all just a misunderstanding, that he missed me too. But the knock never came, the door stayed closed, and my son remained a ghost with a pulse. One night, after a storm rolled through, I found myself sitting at the dining table in the glow of a single lamp. The uneaten Christmas dinner had long since been thrown away. The candles had melted into wax puddles, but the air still carried that heavy scent of grief and garlic. I pulled a sheet of paper from the drawer. It was yellowed at the corners. Not the kind of paper you'd use for something important, but I didn't plan for this to be important. I didn't plan anything at all. I just started writing. The words spilled out, faster than I expected. I didn't write to make him feel guilty. That was never the point. I didn't want to manipulate him or make him pity me. I just needed him to know. Finally, after years of silence and lies, he deserved to know the truth. Dear Adam, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe you'll throw it away. Maybe you'll laugh at it. Maybe you'll burn it. That's okay. But I need to write it anyway, even if it's only for me, the day you told me I wasn't family anymore. I died a little inside, not because of the words themselves, but because I knew someone had made you believe them. Someone made you believe I didn't want you, that I walked away, that I chose to disappear. That couldn't be further from the truth. When your mother and I separated, I fought with everything I had to stay close to you. I begged the court for joint custody. I offered to move closer. I even took a pay cut at work so I could have a more flexible schedule just to be around when you needed me. But every door I knocked on closed in my face. The legal system didn't care that I cried myself to sleep, that I counted the days between visits like a prisoner, that I watched your school plays through videos sent by others because I wasn't allowed in the room. You don't know this, but for over a year I lived just 2 blocks away from your school. A small, dingy one-bedroom with paper-thin walls and a leaking bathroom. But I chose it because I wanted to be nearby just in case you ever needed me. I saw you sometimes, on the sidewalk, at the corner store, once at a bus stop. You didn't see me, but I saw you, and every time I wanted to run to you, wrap you in my arms, and remind you that I was still your dad. But I didn't, because the court said it would confuse you. And your mom made it clear that I wasn't welcome. So I stayed in the shadows, watching you grow up from a distance, watching another man hold your hand. That was the hardest part. Not because I hated him, but because you looked happy. And I wasn't part of it. I still remember your first goal in soccer. You were 8. You ran across the field with your hands in the air, and I shouted so loud I lost my voice. I keep that memory like a photograph in my mind. I don't know what you remember of me now. Maybe the awkward visits, the missed birthdays, the messages I sent that you didn't reply to. But I remember everything, because I never stopped being your father. Not for 1 second. I hope one day you'll understand. Love always. Dottie stared at the letter for hours after I finished it. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was past crying. The tears had dried up days ago. What I felt now was something quieter. Deeper. Like an old wound that had stopped bleeding but hadn't healed. I folded the letter neatly and slipped it into an envelope. I wrote Adam on the front and set it on the table. I didn't intend to send it. I wasn't ready. It was too raw, too vulnerable. What if he read it and still didn't care? What if it only made him angrier? I left the envelope there for days. Sometimes I'd pick it up, then put it back down. I even considered tearing it up, burning it, pretending it never existed, because it was easier to live with the silence than to risk one more rejection. But then something happened. Something I never expected. A week after Christmas, I got a call from Amanda. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me to pick up. Her voice was cold, as usual, but there was something else in it: uncertainty, caution, like she wasn't sure if she should be calling me. Adam found the letter, she said flatly. My heart stopped. What letter? You know which one. He found it in the trash. I didn't mean for that to happen. I saw it sitting out and thought you'd left it by mistake. I didn't respond. I couldn't. He read it, she continued. All of it. There was a long pause. Then in the softest voice I'd ever heard from her, she added, he cried. That's when I knew. Something had shifted, maybe. The letter I never meant to send had finally reached the boy I'd never stopped loving. And maybe, just maybe, the door he slammed shut might open again. It had been 16 days since Christmas. 16 days since the door slammed and my son walked out, leaving behind not just a dinner table full of untouched food, but a father who had no idea if he'd ever get the chance to fix what had been broken. Each day blurred into the next like fog across a window pane. I moved around the house like a ghost straightening pillows, washing the same 2 mugs, glancing out the window every time a car slowed down on the street. Always hoping, always. Afraid, I hadn't touched the Christmas tree. It still stood in the corner, its lights blinking faintly at night like a heartbeat that refused to give out. The gift box, the one he left unopened, sat untouched on the coffee table. I couldn't bring myself to move it. It was the last thing I gave him, and the only thing he hadn't thrown away. Maybe that meant something, maybe not. Then, one Saturday morning, just as the sun melted the frost off the garden fence, someone knocked on the door. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rushed, just 3 firm knocks, deliberate and uncertain, the kind of knock that didn't demand to be heard, but hoped to be welcomed. I opened the door, and there he was. Adam, hair messy, hoodie zipped up to his chin. His eyes were swollen, red around the edges like he hadn't slept or had cried more than he wanted to admit, and in his hands was the box. The same box I'd wrapped in gold paper with a ribbon tied wrong because I've never been good at presentation. He held it close, like it had become something more than just wrapping and tape. Like it had weight now, not just physical but emotional. He didn't speak right away. He didn't have to. The silence between us no longer felt cruel. It felt necessary. Finally, he looked up at me and said, voice shaking. I opened it. Last night, I nodded, unsure whether to breathe, speak, or cry. The watch. He slowly opened the box and turned it toward me. The silver caught the morning light. And there, on the inside of the strap, were the words, "Forever, Dad." I didn't see it before, he said. Didn't even want to. But last night, I don't know, something told me to open it. I watched his hands tremble as he pulled something from his hoodie pocket. The letter, crumpled around the edges. Read and reread, I could tell. Mom gave it to me, he said, his voice almost a whisper now. She said she found it in the trash and didn't know if she should give it to me. But something told her it was time. He unfolded it carefully, as if it might tear just from the air. I read it 3 times, he said. The part about you living 2 blocks from school. The soccer goal. The apartment with the leaking bathroom. His eyes filled again. He blinked, hard, like he was trying to hold the truth in but failing. I didn't know, he choked. I didn't know what they kept from me. I felt my own throat tighten, a pressure I'd held back for too long, but I stayed quiet. This wasn't the time for I told you so's. This wasn't about blame. It was about finally hearing each other. I thought you didn't care, he continued, wiping his cheek. I thought you gave up, that you picked a new life and left us behind, that you didn't want to deal with me anymore. I stepped forward slowly, careful not to crowd him. Adam, I never stopped wanting to be your father. Never. He looked down at the watch again. His fingers ran over the engraving. For a while, I hated you, he admitted. I blamed you for everything, for the divorce, for the emptiness, for how weird I felt during family events. But I didn't even know half the story. No one told me you fought, that you called, that you stayed close. I didn't want to hurt you more, I said gently. I didn't want you stuck in the middle of 2 adults pulling you apart, so I stayed silent, thinking that was the kinder choice. He laughed softly, a broken, bitter laugh. But silence hurts too. I know, I said, my voice breaking. I know that now. He looked up at me, eyes glistening, and for the first time in what felt like years really looked at me. Like a son looks at a father. I'm sorry, he whispered, for what I said, for how I acted, for slamming the door. I stepped forward and wrapped him in my arms before he could say another word. He didn't pull away, didn't flinch. He held me tight, like he was trying to make up for every year lost, every holiday missed, every bedtime story I never got to finish, and in that embrace, I felt something shift, not in him, not in me, but between us. A reconnection, a spark, a home rebuilt not with gifts or apologies, but with truth. After a long moment, we stepped back. He looked at the tree behind me, still standing despite everything. You left the lights up, he said, half smiling. I guess I was still hoping. He looked back at the watch, slipped it onto his wrist. It fit perfectly. I want to know the rest, he said. All of it, the real version, your version. You'll have it, I promised. Every bit. He nodded. Okay. We stood there in the quiet, the morning sun pouring through the door, turning the dust in the air into gold. And in that moment, no presents, no feast, no music, just a father and son, side by side again. We were family, finally,